Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The show starts in 3, 2, 1, go.
What is going on, CaneSport? Izubee Charles, joined by Stephen Wagner, and welcome to another Good Morning CaneSport. We have a ton of Miami Hurricanes news for you on this Friday, January 10th, so let's get straight into it. Yesterday, some pretty big news regarding a quarterback out of Georgia came out as Carson Beck decided to withdraw his name from the NFL draft and enter the transfer portal. We all know Miami's in the market for a quarterback, and what better way to kind of jump back in the market after losing out on John Mateer than go after Carson Beck, who right now jumped to the top of the transfer portal list. Stephen, Carson Beck is a guy that a lot of people love and a lot of people don't like. Obviously had some success in Georgia in 2023. Didn't replicate those numbers in 2024, but still a very good quarterback. Coming into this year, a lot of people predicted him to be a first-round draft pick. That didn't work out that much. He declares now he's back in the college football portal. Stephen, just what are your opening thoughts on Carson Beck jumping back in the portal and Miami's potential of landing him?
Yeah, so someone in the recruiting storm center the other day, or heck, it might have even been the other week at this point. They mentioned something on Quinn Ewers and kind of floating that idea if Miami could be a potential spot for the former Texas quarterback. I think that Carson Beck and Quinn Ewers are kind of like different versions of the same guy. I think Beck is a little bit more athletic and a little bit more mobile. I think Ewers has a slightly better arm, but they're different versions of the same guy in that they will both have holy crap, that was incredible. This guy's going to be a first-round draft pick. You need everyone wants him on their team immediately. But then they also have absolutely boneheaded moments where you really are wondering, what the hell are you doing? And it's gotten to the point where both of these guys have been in college long enough that everyone understands what you're getting with these guys. You take the good with the bad, because it's not like the bad is just going to go away entirely. But you hope that you can surround them with enough of a supporting cast that it won't impact you that much. Even look at Cam Ward this year. I mean, everyone kind of knew coming in from Washington State, his big problem was turnovers. He would have these really spectacular plays, but then he would also have these moments where he, quite frankly, could be a little bit careless and it could, come back to bite them. Miami, some of that was definitely attributed to having a bad offensive line at Washington State and him being able to kind of work through it at Miami and having a better supporting cast and all that stuff. But you still saw some recklessness from Cam Ward this year at Miami. But because he has such spectacular moments, Hurricane fans just all kind of said, yeah, I'm good with taking the good with the bad. If that's going to happen once a game, that's totally fine. Well, with Ewers and Beck, it is going to happen way more frequently than once a game. And so now I think if you get either of these guys, like I said, they obviously have that really star potential, and they are going to have a couple of plays every game that's going to make you go, holy crap, this guy's a first-round talent. He's a first-round draft pick. Man, he is absolutely the guy for us. But then they're also going to have a lot of moments where you're kind of scratching your head going, man, what the hell was he thinking? Because, whereas Cam Ward was very much, making a vertical move going from a school like Washington State to Miami, Carson Beck will be making, at best a lateral move, and some would argue a little bit of a downgrade going from Georgia to Miami, although I would argue right now that I think Miami collectively has better offensive personnel on its roster this year than Georgia did last year. I wasn't particularly impressed with Georgia's receivers as a whole overall as a unit, and I think that Miami is going to be able to offer a little bit more of a support system. But I think this is really going to come down to assuming that Carson Beck does ultimately end up at Miami. I think this is really going to come down to just how good of a support system Miami can surround him with, and how easy is Miami going to be able to make the quarterback's job.
Yeah, I agree with all those points, and kind of a few things that I wanted to mention that, while you were talking is, first off, obviously he had the UCL surgery, the elbow surgery, but Matt did a great story yesterday, kind of saying, hey, this isn't something to be too concerning about. And someone said that Brock Purdy suffered a very similar injury the same year he took the San Francisco 49ers to the Super Bowl. So it's not like a major injury or Tommy John where he's going to miss extensive time. They think he'll be ready to go by the spring, which is great news if he commits to Miami. That's a big if. Pete Nichols on three did a great job of breaking the story. Also mentioned Texas Tech is somewhat of a dark horse, and Ohio State is a team to potentially watch. Obviously, they're still in the college football playoff, but they might be in need of a quarterback after this season. So a few things I wanted to add to that. And then honestly, just kind of talking about Carson Beck in general, watching him his junior year, I thought he was a very, very good quarterback. Obviously, like you mentioned, team around him this year at Georgia was not the best. The wide receivers led the country in drops, and we saw that frequently throughout the year with the Bulldogs. I feel like every game I watch them, one of the wide receivers are dropping a key play, and obviously that's going to make your numbers look, a little bit different. So take it back to 2023. During his junior season, Carson Beck threw for 3,900 yards, 24 touchdowns, just 6 interceptions. Fast forward to this year, 3,400 yards, 28 touchdowns, so a little more there, but 12 interceptions. So he doubled the interceptions from last year. And then I did a story yesterday too, speaking with a Dogs HQ writer, Jake Roos. I don't know. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing the name. And I asked him, hey, kind of what was the biggest difference from Carson Beck last year to this year? He said some might point to the offensive scheme, some might point to poor line play. Receiver drops didn't help either. To boot, Beck seemed to have the yips for much of the season, as well as only really hitting a bit of a stride in the last third of the season or so. So he kind of mentioned what I talked about. Weapons around him not usually up to what Georgia produces. During that big junior year, he had Brock Bowers, who was the best, one of the best tight ends in the NFL this year, as well as Ladd McConkey, a awesome weapon for the San Diego Chargers, as we see. So I really do think, like you mentioned, Steven, if Miami can surround Carson Beck with weapons, obviously they return the majority of the offensive line besides Zach Carpenter. You bring in a guy like C.J. Daniels from LSU, a guy like JoJo Trader, showed some a little bit during that bowl game. Elijah Lofton as well, Mark Fletcher in the backfield, Jordan Lowe. You have the weapons on offense, and similar to that Cam Ward situation, he's coming in kind of looking to, hey, I need to boost my draft stock. A lot of people thought entering this year, Carson Beck had that first-round potential on him. Obviously, things didn't work out like that. Now he's coming back to college football. I personally think this is a match made in heaven. And obviously, we have to throw that out there. His girlfriend does play at the University of Miami, so that may add a little incentive to come down to South Florida. A kid from Florida, from Jacksonville, played his ball at Mandarin High School. And, if I'm Miami, I'm kind of telling them, hey, you can do exactly what Cam Ward did. Cam Ward's projected to be that number one quarterback in the NFL draft right now. Carson Beck has that potential. And if you haven't read that story about, the cross-examination of Carson Beck from yesterday, I really do recommend reading it. A great insight of just, what happened in that situation. And another thing that intrigued me too, he spoke about that decision to enter the portal. That was a bit of a surprise to Georgia. They thought he was going to stick with his guns, go to the NFL draft, but he decides to come back to college football, which I think is very, very interesting and very convenient for Miami, who needs a quarterback. And kind of, Stevens, just want to kind of ask you a little bit more about this Carson Beck situation. Do you think Miami can kind of replicate what they did this year? Obviously, you don't want to compare apples and oranges to last year to this year, whatever it may be. Do you think Miami can continue to roll or continue to progress if Carson Beck comes into Miami and does what people think he can do?
I mean, straight up, last year, Cam Ward was the reason Miami won 10 games. The rest of the roster, the offensive line was pretty good, but, kind of struggled in the run game at times. There were definitely some inconsistencies in Miami's ability to run the ball effectively. It took Damian Martinez quite a while to, really click and get going. It kind of felt like, like Mark Fletcher was like really close, but, couldn't really break into a rhythm. And then Cam Ward was consistently bailing Miami's both coaches and players, especially on the defensive side, out of trouble over and over and over again. Miami had to constantly turn to Cam Ward and say, hey, we made a mistake. Can you fix this for us? And that's exactly what Cam Ward was. He was the great eraser, and that's why he's the number one overall pick. Carson Beck, straight up, is not going to be that. That's not a knock against him. That is not a criticism. That's just what he is at this point. Because, like I said, I think at this point, especially in the portal, everyone has a pretty good idea of what someone can do and what someone can't do. So I think that, Miami is going to really kind of have to, and Miami fans are really going to have to kind of come to terms with, not looking at what Carson Beck can't do, because what he's not going to be able to be is Cam Ward. He's just not. But what he can do is be a very good quarterback, an experienced signal caller who's taken a lot of snaps in really big games, a quarterback who has won big games, a quarterback who's won SEC championships, who has consistently won on the road in loud and hostile environments, and someone who has proven that whenever he has a good support system around him, he's pretty damn good. Whenever he has, a really good tight end, whenever he has consistent receivers and a run game and an offensive support system around him that makes his job easier, he can be really good. I mean, I remember, the first year that we really saw Carson Beck kind of, like taking over the offense. It wasn't the same Georgia team that we'd seen in years past, where they could just physically overwhelm you and manhandle you at the line of scrimmage. Georgia was not doing that at all. It was much more of a passing-oriented team. They relied a lot more on quarterback play. And Beck did a really, really good job. So whenever he is given the ball, and whenever he's given the ball and he's told to go make plays, he absolutely can. But I think that Mike Bobo, the offensive coordinator at Georgia, didn't really do him many favors, and I think that his supporting cast didn't really do him many favors either. And I do think that at least offensively, he'll definitely be taking a step up coming to Miami, even though obviously defensively, I this year Miami was not on the same level at all that Georgia was on last year.
I agree with you, and I don't want to, jump ahead too much, but Steven, I can already see the captions or the headlines. Is the U Beck, with the U
Yeah,
back? Get it.
that's good. I didn't think about that.
For sure. Hey, with all seriousness, no, I really do think if Miami can shore up things on the defensive side of the ball, Carson Beck comes in, I think he can kind of, continue to progress this program. And obviously, we've talked a lot of good about him, but obviously every player has their negatives. We mentioned last year Cam Ward entered with the turnover issues. Carson Beck kind of makes some questionable decisions. But one thing that kind of stuck out to me as well when I was speaking to Jake from Dogs HQ, I'll read this quote right here. I asked him kind of just what are the things that stood out to you the most about Carson Beck? What are some knocks or some things that you have some concerns about? He said, as far as what stands, he has a definite NFL arm and is more than a capable playmaker. It won't shock me to see his name climb back up draft boards, but he certainly needed another year to make that happen. As for concerns, one of the things you rarely heard mentioned alongside Beck was his voice in the locker room. He's an even keel guy, so if you're looking for the fire on the sideline, you probably won't get that. Steven, just kind of hearing that, what are your thoughts? Obviously, he has an arm talent. He can do it with his legs, but not really a locker room guy that's going to amp up the guys. Like we saw multiple times throughout the year, Cam Ward, taking charge, and you mentioned being the great eraser for the Hurricanes. Here, and Carson Beck's kind of that even keel guy. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, like I said, this is going to come down to how easy is the supporting cast going to be able to make his job. Shannon Dawson, we've seen him kind of, both baby court. Well, I don't know if I should say baby, but be a little bit more conservative and a little bit more protective of quarterbacks with his play calling at times. But then we've also seen him completely open it up, like he did for Cam Ward last year, open up everything in the playbook and say, "Man, I need you to go be a star for me. I need you to push the ball down the field, go score some damn points." But we also saw him, really, really kind of try to protect Emory Williams whenever he made those starts for Miami as a freshman. And even in the second half of the bowl game last year, or this past year against Iowa State, we saw, Miami really try to protect him and keep him out of, situations where he's having to do too much. And I kind of thought that last year I kind of thought that last year with Carson Beck, Georgia consistently was putting him in positions where he was just kind of asked to do too much. His job was getting almost too complicated. It wasn't, things weren't, run of the mill simple anymore. And really and truthfully, I think every single every single head coach and coordinator's job in college football should be to try to make the quarterback position as easy as you possibly can, because no one position needs to be more cerebral at all times and has to make quicker decisions than the quarterback. I think that if Miami is able to really simplify things for Beck, which, like I said, I think that they absolutely can do, and I think that Shannon Dawson has proven he understands how to do, that he can have success at Miami, but he's not going to be the kind of guy where you just hand him the entire playbook and say, man, we are going to call absolutely everything in here. This is going to be a situation where he's going to need a little bit of help.
Yeah, I agree with you. And kind of before we move on to Carson Beck talk, just want to give my final thoughts on this. Listen, I'm obviously, Matt and Gary always say I'm the happy guy, I'm the happy-go-lucky, sunshine and rainbows, but I really do think Carson Beck is the perfect fit. Not the perfect fit. Don't want to say perfect. Nothing's perfect. The best option for Miami right now moving forward. Obviously, if you look through their transfer portal, there is absolutely no. I might have been ranked as a transfer portal quarterback if I jumped in right now. There's nothing left really, and you do not want to go into the spring kind of with that uncertainty. I think if you get Carson Beck on board, that brings a level of comfort level. Hey, we know we got a guy in the quarterback room that's an SEC level quarterback that has played against some of the best teams in the country, that's beaten some of the best teams in the country. Obviously, he's had his lows this year, but his highs are pretty darn good. A lot of people projected him to be a top 10 quarterback heading into a senior year. Get him on campus, like you mentioned, Steven. Surround him with some weapons. The offensive line is there. The running game is there. The receivers, I would say, are the only question marks, and obviously the defense. But they were working on that. This transfer window brought in a lot of guys in the secondary. So I feel like if those things all fall into place, Carson Beck can, obviously, like we saw with Cam Ward had benefited tremendously from coming to Miami. Miami also benefited a lot. Now you're showing, hey, we have the proof, we have the pudding. 1-year quarterback, come in, get your draft stock up, go to the NFL, make your millions, and thank us later. And I think that'd be the perfect bridge for Luke Nickel. Obviously, a lot of people on the boards talking about, hey, Luke Nickel, give him a shot right now. I personally do not think he's ready to compete at the level Miami wants to compete. No knock against Luke Nickel, which is very hard for a true freshman to come in to lead one of the best teams in the country. Like I said, I think Luke Nickel's a heck of a player. I do think if he sits behind a veteran quarterback like Carson Beck, learns the game, I think that would be great for Miami. So those are just my parting thoughts. Really do want to see what the rest of you guys think, obviously in the YouTube comments, on the message boards. Do you think Miami should go after Carson Beck? Do you think it makes sense? So with that being said, we'll move on to high school recruiting and the guys of the future of the Hurricanes. Steven, you've been up in Texas covering the Navy All-American Bowl, almost an Army All-American Bowl. That's what it's been called forever. Hayden Lowe, 2025 Miami team, has been tearing it up. A lot of guys are really, really liking what he's doing up against those fellow All-Americans. Steven, you've been all over him. You actually spoke with him as well, talking about his commitment to the Canes, some of his goals and things like that. So just what have been your thoughts on Hayden Lowe as a player and kind of what's he been telling you as well?
Hayden Lowe, I think, has been one of the more impressive performers here in San Antonio. At least I've been very, very impressed with him. He has looked really good going up against a lot of really high-end competition. I think it's kind of teasing what he has the potential to do at Miami. He'll be a good litmus test to see just how good of a developing staff this Miami group really is. Is Jason Taylor going to actually be able to get the most out of Hayden Lowe? Is Joe Salavea going to be able to help out? Is Mario Cristobal going to put him in positions to succeed? Will the defensive coordinator, find a place for him in the scheme? Because a guy like Hayden Lowe, his ceiling is so absolutely massive, but he's still very, very raw. And I think that he is kind of that perfect guy for Miami to have the opportunity to really craft into a high-end top player. I think that if he doesn't reach his potential, quite frankly, I won't be able to feel like some of it won't be on Miami staff unless, maybe there are possibly external circumstances or injuries or something like that. But if he doesn't reach his potential, I won't be able to help but feel like, Miami staff would, be in part sort of responsible for it. I think that, he is the perfect mold that is just waiting to be sculpted. And, right now, the pressure's on Miami to see what they can sculpt him into, just what can they do with a player of this caliber.
Yeah, I feel like that's a great point. When you mention a guy like Hayden Lowe, obviously has all the physical tools, comes from a great program, which Mario Cristobal also landed a great defensive lineman out of that program, Kayvon Thibodeau, during his time at Oregon. So, we asked this head coach, hey, can you compare Hayden Lowe, Kayvon Thibodeau? He said, no, they're two own people, and they're going to show that. And he had a lot of great things to say about Hayden Lowe, who's also his nephew. So maybe that played a little part in him. But all jokes aside, Hayden Lowe is a tremendous, tremendous athlete, and he's making some noise out there in San Antonio, which you love to hear. So make sure to check out that update on Hayden Lowe if you haven't. Learned a little bit more about the future Miami Hurricane. Speaking with the future, coaches have been on the road all week long, checking in on players in state, out of state, and all in between. Stephen, we saw that Miami's head coach Mario Cristobal made a stop at IMG Academy. We all know IMG produces some of the best talents in the country. Checked in on a trio actually of offensive linemen and defensive end Jay Cruel. Caught up with Kenai Pepe, Brett Colajay, and Genevre Carr. Sorry if I mispronounced that first name. Steven, you had the chance to catch up with Colajay. Kind of what's he saying, how that visit went with, Mario Cristobal and things like that.
Yeah, it went very well. Colajay's absolutely one of the guys that they're going to be very in the mix for. A guy who they are going to be keeping an eye on for quite some time. Miami's involved with him. Miami's involved with his family. They're really doing everything they can to try to make that strong early impression. Breck had a chance to get down to Miami last fall. I believe it was either the first game or their first home game or their second home game of the season. Came down with a couple of IMG guys, checked it out. Alex Mirabal is definitely playing a big role in this recruitment. So is Mario Cristobal. They're both toting their track record of developing offensive linemen, which obviously is excellent. And I think that we're Cristobal and Mirabal both have such a reputation that you can't help not at least having the conversation with them if you're an elite offensive lineman, which J certainly is. I think he's probably going to end up getting to campus at some point this spring. Right now, he's still kind of working to narrow down his list, but his list is pretty damn big. I think that he'll. I think that he'll probably announce a top group of schools at some point in the near-ish future. He said he's going to start trying to narrow things down soonish. Then he'll take some OVs, but he's not really dead set on when he's going to want to commit. He just kind of said he'll commit whenever the time feels right, which is about as open ended as could be. We'll see just how badly Miami really is going to end up wanting him, but certainly he does look like one of those prototypical IMG stud offensive linemen. It's pretty hard not to look at film and immediately see a guy like Breck stand out. No surprise to me at all that he's receiving this level of interest from Miami early on. I think he's going to have like a real chance to be someone special.
Yeah, coaches all over the state of Florida. And sometimes I kind of ask myself, how the heck do they get around Florida so fast, so quickly to see all these recruits? Nevertheless, they end up doing it. They're making an impact on the trail. And a lot of guys are, locking up potential junior day visits, official visits with the Hurricane. So these trips aren't going, empty-handed. They're making real progression with a lot of these guys. And a lot of these guys are feeling like priorities, saying, hey, Coach Cristobal, Coach Mirabal, Coach whoever it may be came up and see me. And I really feel the love for Miami. And one guy I kind of want to mention too before we close out the show and, the recruiting talk is Carson Baker out of Georgia, 4-star running back out of Langston Hughes High School. And, man, he is one of my favorite running backs in the 2026 class. Coach Stephen Field went up to Georgia, checked in on him. And, he's a guy that I'm trying to kind of bring this back with last cycle, Shakai Mills Knight, running back that I saw. He was kind of a bit of an underrated guy. I said, hey, this guy's going to be a special talent. Turned out to be, one of the best running backs in the country. Carson Baker kind of gives me those vibes. Obviously, a lot of time still in his recruitment. Just wanted to talk about him a little bit as a guy that Miami went out to go see on the road. And Miami's seen plenty of prospects. And we have had you covered with all those guys Miami's checked in on. And, later this morning, we'll check in to see where the coaches are as well and have you covered on that. So stay tuned at CaneSport.com for all your Miami Hurricanes news. For Stephen Wagner, I'm Izubee Charles. Thank you all for watching. Have a great rest of your morning.